The Hangout on air is live. Okay. So Vanita is not coming. She just had a long day. So that's that. I saw a message from Nicole that she was coming but couldn't stay the whole time.
Okay.
And Geo Moses said on the event page that she is coming.
Okay, great.
So
Hi,
I think.
Hi, Kim.
Hi, guys.
How you doing?
I'm good. How's everybody?
I'm good.
I was listening to the update.
Yeah. So that's all I know. But so it looks like, it'll at least be the four of us consistently, and five of us when Nicole was here. And Vanita's going to take the night off. And so Leonie was saying she's in Annapolis now. Is that right?
No, I just came back from Annapolis on Sunday.
Oh, you're back in Toronto?
No, I'm back in the house I'm staying at in California.
Oh.
But when I came, so I kind of spent the day recovering. But late yesterday, they were changing one of the power poles, so we lost power for like 12 hours or something like that.
Wow.
More than 12 hours, yeah.
Wow, I see. Yeah. Well, no, I mean, your agenda wasn't any later than anybody else's this session. That's just how we've been doing.
Just getting it in the last minute.
I think we're all tired. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So but good questions.
Oh, I'm glad you like them.
Yeah, definitely. What's going on with you, Kim Brandon?
I'm okay. I'm doing a lot of downsizing and getting some books out there. I'm trying to get some books published. So, it's like I have to call myself on some of the procrastination.
Yeah. Well, good.
Yeah, congratulations.
It's funny. I was so upset to hear Taki Shenge passed away. That was just so hard.
Oh, I hadn't heard that. Really?
Yeah, I think Saturday. She passed away in her sleep on Saturday.
Oh.
Yeah, so maybe we could read one of her poems before we're done, if there's time.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Hello,
Nicole, you're here.
Hey, Nicole.
Hi, everyone. I'm here.
How long did we have you?
Probably maybe an hour at least. Maybe a little. Might be because they changed the location last minute, so I might be able to stay a little past an hour. And yeah.
Good, wonderful.
Okay, wonderful.
So the more efficient we are with our time management, then the more of Nicole's brilliance we can experience.
That's right.
Yeah, so the only one really that's not here, Nicole, right now is Geo Moses. I'm not expecting Vanita to join us tonight.
Okay.
I am expecting Geo, so I guess she's running a little bit late. But since the four of us are here, Leonie, maybe we should
sure
go ahead and get started.
All right. So welcome everybody to today's session of the Global Black Feminist Reading Circle. We'll start with introductions. My name is Leonie Smith, and I'm currently in California, though originally from Toronto, Canada. And I'd like to pass it over to Nicole to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Leonie. Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Wilson. I am joining tonight from Houston, Texas. Happy to be here.
Welcome.
Michelle?
Hi, everybody. I am Michelle Odom in Brooklyn, New York, with my entry card, and also happy to be here.
Wonderful. Kim? Okay, you have passed the secret password.
And I'm Kim, and I am in New York.
Hi, Kim.
Okay, and I see that Gio has joined us, but I don't see her on camera yet, so she may not be able to introduce herself. Oh, wait.
Oh, I'm here, but I think I clicked the wrong button, and now my picture is not showing up.
We can hear you, though, so why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself while we work on getting your camera working.
Okay, I'm Georgette Moses, and I'm joining you guys from Columbia, South Carolina. And I have my book. I'm holding it up. You just can't see it.
Wonderful. Well, welcome all. So tonight we're looking at we are discussing, as you saw, Eloquent Rage by Brittney Cooper, and we're looking at chapter 7, Orchestrated Fury. So I'd like to invite a volunteer to read the summary, and then we could take a look at the first question. I'm wondering, Kim, would you be willing to read the summary?
Certainly. Orchestrated Fury takes its name from the Audre Lorde quote that reads, "Women of color in America have grown up within a symphony of anger, at being silenced, at being unchosen, and knowing that when we survive, it is in spite of a world that takes for granted our lack of humanness, and which hates our very existence outside of its service." And I say symphony rather than, how do you say this word?
Cacophony.
Cacophony.
That's
because
right.
we have had to learn to orchestrate those furies so that they do not tear us apart. The anger both Lorde and Cooper hold as a reasonable response to the endless racism heaped on Black women. Systemic racism means we are impacted many times throughout our days with racism and other oppressions. In this chapter, Cooper explores the many furies and rages that impact the lives of Black people in the U.S. at the personal, community, and systemic level. Excuse me.
Thank you.
I hope I didn't butcher that for you. I'm sorry.
It's all right. I followed you just fine. Does anyone feel moved to start with take a look at the first question?
I'll take it. I'll read it. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. In what ways do Black women orchestrate their furies in our communities, within our families, within our workplaces and church spaces? How have you navigated your own ways? Wow. Good question, Leonie.
Anyone feel moved to start? Did you want to start with responding, Nicole?
Yeah, one of the ways that I want to kind of our attention to is just the engaging, like just the context, the moment, is how I am seeing Black women orchestrate fury by trying to, and I want to say attempting to, or I don't have a better word, but what I'm trying to communicate here is political power, accessing political power here in America, like and abroad, But I'm thinking in particular, Michael Brown's mother, who is running for local office.
Nice.
And the ways in which Black Lives Matter or the movement for Black lives initially considered themselves outside doing work, that holds the establishment accountable, but very much so outside of those corrupt institutions. And the rhetoric has changed somewhat. Why not infiltrate? Why not build power in that capacity? And so I thought, I just want to take a moment and just applaud her for taking her pain, orchestrating this particular theory, if you will, in such a way that she's going to use her, this celebrity that is so connected to her pain, right? To do something in the service of and memory of her child. So that's just one way that I am, considering what Black women do.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I think that's a great question. I was so excited. I was like, oh, I can't wait to hear these questions. I guess I feel torn between how we build communities and the sacrifices that we make, and sometimes at our own expense. Like there are just times where you find some very warrior Black women who become martyrs almost, and stay too long fighting the cause, not asking for enough help, not having that mentor relationship with women. But boy, when we come together and we do it well, it is something to behold. I just love when you are in communities with sisters, and it is just something that you say, like this group, for example, that is just something that I try not to miss because it gives me that sense of community, and it helps me deal with my rage and my fury, just to know that I'm not alone. So sometimes we do it brilliantly, and then other times when you look at the backbiting that we have when we don't all have the same mission, the same goals, that I find just disheartening when you look at television and it's so much of us putting us down, or you talk to people and it's that same vein. But I don't know. I'm just seeing more and more connections where we are in community, and it's outstanding. And I also would like to just endorse how more and more I'm just building bridges for our daughters. I just see it more and more than ever before, that we're raising the girls up at higher levels than ever before because somebody raised us up a little bit more. So I'm excited about how we are handling our theory.
Thank you. That's great. When you mentioned martyrs, I put a link in the chat because it reminded me of the story of Marielle Franco, who is a Brazilian politician, queer woman, single mother, born and raised in a favela in Brazil, who was gunned down in March of this year. And she was one of the first politicians, certainly the first Afro-Brazilian, like lesbian politician to kind of like make it through, like, and then she was gunned down, most likely by other politicians. But what I find incredibly inspirational, one of the main things I find inspirational about it is, I was talking to somebody who's from Brazil and also does work in the favelas, that they learned that her community learned their lesson because she was gunned down as a single person. And so now what they're doing is that they are building a network of people who can be politicians acting on behalf, speaking on behalf of the poor. They learned a lesson from Gandhi, from MLK, and from losing her, that if you have one, you are vulnerable. If you have a community of the same, then that makes you less vulnerable. So I see that as a very, you talked about, Kim, about like seeing how, and Nicole, about seeing women, Black women kind of step forward. I think it's a very inspirational thing. I wonder what it would look like, or to imagine what it would be like to not just have like one of us, but to have a whole group of us kind of stand up, so that if someone is knocked down for whatever reason, it may not be a dramatic end like Marielle Franco had, but that there's always someone there to replace. There's always a network. It's done through interdependence as well. So I'm very inspired by that as well.
But I think that was the network behind Black Lives Matter, that there wasn't one face out initially. There was not one face representing the group.
Yeah, yes, that's true. That's definitely in this context, in the U.S. context, one to point to.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else?
Well, I think from another angle, sometimes our fury gets channeled programmatically, you know, kind of like what we're doing here, as well as, you know, in much more organized, professional kinds of ways. Like the example that's always on the top of my mind is Black Women's Blueprint here in New York. But, you know, taking our fury and coming up with programmatic ideas, you know, not just being angry about the problems that we see, but really trying to think through and implement solutions at whatever level and capacity we can muster. And so, you know, so I think that's one thing, certainly within church, you know, church spaces. I mean, there's kind of, you know, obviously there's still a lot of very religious people, but I think there are also a lot of people who have been turned off by the church, who feel that the church has failed us, you know, particularly women in some way. But, you know, we didn't always, when walking away from the church, create other avenues for coming together. And so, you know, I think more and more that is happening, and that's a good thing, because whether we're, you know, at some level, to me, everything comes down to a matter of belief. You know, we don't really have a lot of factual information in this world. And so, you know, so if you don't believe whatever they're talking about in the church, then, you know, then I think it's important that you try to figure out what you do believe and create avenues to be in community with others like that.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else before we move on to the second question? I think, Gio, you're the only one that hasn't spoken. You don't have to, but if is there anything that you want to share?
No, I'm just sorry I missed half of Kim's beautiful commentary because I had to come exit and come back. But no, I think everybody really touched things that I'm thinking of also. So
thank you. Okay, who would like to read the second question?
I'll read it, but I just want to say on question one, and, you know, really the whole chapter is about the myriad ways that fury manifests itself, big and small, quiet and loud, you know, inelegant and eloquent. And, you know, and so it's all around us, even when we're not quite sure what we're looking at. You know, for example, she spends a lot of time on the Michelle Obama hairstyle at the Trump inauguration. But really, you know, and I can see her point as the ponytail as an expression of rage, but I can also see it as Michelle was just tired and just didn't have time to fool around with her hair that day because they were busy. And so I think, you know, a lot of times we project meaning onto things and just run with it. But, you know, in reality, something totally different could be going on. And, you know, and I guess that comes out of my experience of when I first started cutting my hair and, you know, people believing and saying things to me that I was making some kind of political comment, which, you know, as I've told you all many times, I really was not. So, but, you know, I think we do that all the time, is get a perception about something and run with it. On to question 2. Centering her understanding of the Obamas, more specifically Michelle Obama, in her role as First Lady, Cooper outlines respectability politics, its history, its purpose, and the mark it has made in how Black people in the United States see themselves and are seen by others. Do you think that there is still room for respectability politics as a strategy based on your understanding of the state of safety and acceptance of Black lives in the United States and the African diaspora?
Thank you, Michelle. I wonder if you have anything to start with as a comment. Want to start us off in this round?
Well,
again, not required.
Well, you know, I always have something to say, Leonie. See, I don't know. I read the chapter. I read the chapter very carefully. I have been really, really, really trying to understand what all of the criticism and hostility is toward the idea of respectability. And I remain concerned that we may be throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Because I think that respectability, there's a dimension that has to do with what white people think about us. But I think there's another dimension that has to do with what we think of ourselves and what we think of each other. And so I think that to me, there's always going to be a place for self-respect. There's always going to be a need for us to strive to respect each other, those closest to us, our family, our community. And to me, you know, if white folks then have some kind of love for us because of it, who cares? If they don't, who cares? But, you know, I think that I'm just concerned that, you know, we're not making a fine enough distinction when we go on the anti-respectability train of thought. So that's a yes, Leonie.
Yeah, I hear that. That's great. Thank you. I think I'll jump in here. I think we very well may arrive on the same road. It's about how you get to on the same path. It's about how you get there. Because my concern around the respectability politics things is that if it comes from this idea of white gaze or comes birth out of white supremacy, it will change the quality of how it is that we are being. And so it very well may be that outside of that context, what's good for Black life might look similar to what falls under the category, what's named or labeled as respectability politics. But if it comes from, for me, I think with the quality of respectability politics is that it is in response. It is born of the white gaze, and that in and of itself makes it corrupted. So when I was thinking about this question, I was very much aware that it could end up looking very similar or the same. And I actually don't think that it will, because I don't know whether or not I would point to how it is that we live in the Western world, and specifically how life is lived in the United States, as necessarily being excellent for the human race. It seems so I don't know whether or not it would actually end up looking the same. You see much more healthier communities elsewhere, and they may not have the money and they may not have the same structures, but they can, but they know how to take care of each other, and they know how to be with each other, and they know how to take care of the earth. And so I do question if it would look the same. Yeah, so for me, it's about the gaze that it comes from. And I think that we need to probably, especially I think that it's important to expand your horizons outside of the lane that you're in. So I don't know which is why I really like this group that we have, and always encourage when we put together our reading lists, reading things from a more international perspective, because I think that there's more to be learned from the diaspora or that there's richness to be had by learning from the diaspora, that you will not find if only looking at things from an American context.
Yeah, I definitely get your argument there, Leonie, but I also see, especially, my brothers and sisters on the continent engaging respectability politics as well. I mean, I just think instead of us saying the white gaze, perhaps we should say the white colonial or the colonial gaze. I mean, it's a residue of colonialism, whereby some of the traditional, colonizers these days, where we see some of the traditional practices of folks in their in communities that are either adjacent to where they are or near where they are, and they will, take to social media calling them backwards and so forth. I mean, that is also a form of respectability. I think it's difficult to dismantle and have these conversations about respectability politics because so much of it is rooted in social class and our and the ways in which we talk about and attend to poverty, right? Because respectability is about a striving, if you will, having something, or getting somewhere, and this is supposedly the way to do it. And the problem is whether I'm talking about Bill Cosby's infamous pound cake speech, if I'm looking at what Brittney Cooper has said that Michelle Obama, even some of the comments Barack Obama has made, if I'm talking about you know, some of my in the diaspora comments also that are being made about, you know, so-called traditional communities or tribalism and, you know, tribal practices and so forth that are demonized. You know, the white gaze, the colonizers' gaze. It is again this thing that we still can't talk about, that we saw affecting and impacting Black women in When and Where I Enter, that is still an issue because some way, shape, form, or fashion, again, I keep seeing social class and social standing, socioeconomic, some kind of way pulled into that. So when Cooper says, I think it's page 154, is it? Where she's saying like, yeah, here's what the respectables would say, but they wouldn't put it in hip hop parlance, you know. Um, it's problematic. And I think it's problematic mainly for me because I feel like as a representative, I fully accept and think that I'm a Generation Xer. And I'm not, I know Cooper says she's a zillennial, but I fully think I'm a Generation Xer and I am sandwiched between, you know, the baby boomers and the millennials. And I've seen these boomers like my parents, my father, namely, who have worked and consistently stayed on jobs and not necessarily, you know, understanding, you know, this. I'm not going to say they understand the struggle. I'm just saying the struggle is a bit different. And what does it mean for, you know, I've heard, you know, folks from that generation saying, well, if they would, you know, do this and then you can get a job and you can, you know, and it's like, yeah, it's so much that's folded into that. First and foremost, what we know is that a lot of the boomers, their gains came from, you know, pressure, Black power, civil rights, um, and affirmative action and so forth, whereby they were in integrated spaces. But what we have, what was handed down to us, what was bequeathed to my generation, the Gen Xers, you know, hell, you can do everything right and still not get anywhere. You still gonna be last hired and first hired. You still gonna have more knowledge than Becky, and you still have to watch Becky get promotions before you because some kind of way Becky got networks and connections that you don't have. You still gonna be at the bottom some kind of way if you're Black, or so many Blacks who are gonna rise to the top and they're so tokenized that it's not much that they can do to affect change. And so it's a rage, it's a railing against respectability politics because the question is, what has it done for us lately? Not much. I really do want to see statistics on, you know, Black women in leadership in the 70s, Black women in leadership in the 80s. I want to see what happened. Of course, you know, the economy changed. But I'm just sure you all that we saw declines, not necessarily gains. So again, I do have a problem with respectability politics. I don't think it is an effective strategy for, I just don't, I don't think it's going to work for us, for our brothers and sisters in the diaspora. It is, we're already coded and marked and read in certain ways. And I just don't see it as an effective means for us to talk back, fight back, and anything else. I'm not here for respectability politics. I gotta stand with Cooper on this one. Sorry, Michelle.
Oh, I know you do. I know you do. I'm waiting on some of my boomers to speak up. But you know, I just have to say, Nicole, just one thing. And maybe I don't know. Just one thing. We know this is a very complex problem that we're dealing with. I don't believe there is any single strategy that could ever possibly address the monster that is going on here. It's so complex. I'm loath to even start naming the dimensions, because it's intertwined in everything. And so if there's not one strategy, then I think it's strategic to keep all the irons in the fire that we can, to keep all the tools in the toolbox that we can. It is a single tool. So, Cooper talks about, and I think, I don't want to jump the gun, but I think Leonie has a question about this, but just how much, how invested people were in the Obamas, in Barack's election. And I saw that, when it was happening. And certainly I had the common sense of joy that was in the air. But it never occurred to me that the election of one Black man as president was going to solve all of the hate, all of the issues, all of the problems that are so intertwined in the fabric of American society from its pre-founding. How would it be possible that the election of one man would, woof, like a magic wave, solve all those problems? And so my concern is that I don't know if we're always being realistic about how complex this shit is. If it were so easy that it could be solved with the stroke of a pen, with a single strategy, we'd have solved it 400 years ago.
And I agree. I agree with you, Michelle. I just want to quickly say, but isn't that the way this thing works and it's set up so that it keeps Black people having to do the emotional labor? So it's like the symbolism of a biracial, let's call it what it is, because he's, a mixed Black biracial president, to say, okay, well, we're no longer racist. America has gotten past her race, her issues with racism. It is just another way to make Black folks accountable and doing the emotional, the affective, if you will, labor that we should not have to do. That should not be ours. We should not be attached to it. We understand that the beneficiaries of white supremacy in this nation should be doing that work. So I agree with you. That was ludicrous. And then now we are in a cycle where we are continually dealing with the blowback, from the Obama presidency, and not that Cooper is specifically calling out how respectability politics have a way of giving a Black man an advantage that a Black woman would never necessarily have. And I don't know if that's because he can be read as biracial. If when people see President Obama, they see the white mother from, Kansas that was also a part of his narrative, right? That they don't see a Black American man, that they see and his father Kenyan and African. I don't know how that factors into, how he's read and coded and marked here, but But again, it's just more of the same. Y'all, black folks do the labor, our bodies being used to suggest something about the progressiveness of America or politics. It's just ludicrous to me. Okay, now I'm gonna be quiet.
Wow. Look at y'all. Wow. But isn't it when I read this chapter, I had to say I had to take a good look at, that terminology, respectability politics, and referred back to a book we read earlier, at the dark end of the street, and how, well, where did this term, where did it become so powerful, so necessary for African Americans to embrace as which we're told that it was a means of protection for us. But is it really? And has it been today at all? Some of our most, we would consider politically correct and perfect Black people are dead, murdered, brutalized. So how much protection has that afforded us? So I think we have to look at, really realistically at that term. What informs the respectability? Is it the cultural, religious, and social indoctrinations that, where were they given to us from? Okay, the colonizers or whoever it is that was in power at the moment. Looking at it more broadly, more with a more worldview that Leonie has interjected, where is it written that this is the only way we can save our lives or move ahead, or because that group that's in power, we need to be like them to be human? We don't. And perhaps if we looked at uh, other revolutionaries in other cultures to see, well, how did they make it? Okay, yeah, they were killed and everything was done to them too, but were they able to start a movement, a change of mindset? And I think that's what's really needed in a country where, that one first Black president and first beautiful Black family, who were perfect, as perfect as we could make them produce in our culture at this time, and still we're called monkeys and everything else, the angry Black woman. Okay, the dubious Black weak man. They've called our president a homosexual and Michelle a transvestite, because we can't be perfect for those people who don't want us to be a part of them. And those people have the loudest voices. That doesn't mean they're the majority, but for some reason they have the greater force in our community. And it's parroted by our religious leaders and our social leaders. And you can't be Farrakhan and expect everybody to get behind you, even if some of the things you say could be right, could be useful. And on the other hand, you can't be, oh, what's that dude with the big afro who was going around with Bill Cosby on that Bash America, Bash Black America tour? You know who I'm talking about, right? The academic, what is his name? I can't think of his name now.
Cornel West.
That's the dude. Okay, you can't be that guy and expect to get a positive flow behind you that will make any positive change in the lives of the people that are trying to, survive today. And you can't be that other dude. Okay, I'm bashing the brothers. But, they have the loud voices and people listen to them and get behind them because they feel comfortable with their ideologies, and say that, the Black homosexuals are caused by white supremacy. Well, dude, you got a limited mindset. Are you okay? Because that's not the reality. That's just, a platform you want to get behind because you can get people to follow you. It's egotistical and not emotionally intelligent. Okay, and I think that is what's wrong Well, that's a major roadblock, is because we think, oh, this is the only way we can get there, because that's how Martin got there, that's how Rosa got there, that's how whoever we are looking at as our successful leaders have gained the small amount of ground that we think we've gained, but then we get knocked back down. They put the carrot in front of us and say, yeah, you got it. We're coming together, kumbaya. And then they wipe it all away with the next legislation, that they don't show us on CNN, because this CNN is not a fancy musical platform for us to gain knowledge, which we should be watching, okay? Because that's what's really happening, is things are being codified to remove not only our rights as human beings, but everyone's. But if they put the black face on there, people care less about it. And that is a mindset that has to be changed. And hey, you're right, Michelle, it's so complicated. How do we change it? But it's got to start from every avenue to change it, because otherwise they'll always have that trick in the bag, right? Put the black face on there, put the welfare mother on there, knowing that, the brown face is not the one who's taking up all the welfare, well, the social, financial money. No, it's not us. We weren't the first, the brown people weren't the first immigrants, illegal immigrants. It's your Irish grandmother, okay? But the truth is so hard. It's a bitter pill for them to swallow. So it's easier to gloss it over and follow the easy path. And so the great minds in our communities need to work out, this disjointed approach to the social problems that afflict us all. And it's not just respectability, because what does that really mean today? You have to figure out, what does that really mean today to you? And will it hold you back from making progress? Does my religious respectability prevent me from embracing my gay or bisexual brother who's, trying to strive for the same goals that I'm trying to strive for? Is it holding you back, placing yourself in a box of respectability? So maybe you have to break out of it to move forward and find those other like-minded individuals to build that force. So you're not alone, and you're not the only face that is appearing on talk radio and Fox News that they want to throw darts at and say, lock her up. Okay. That's all I got to say.
Oh, Gio, that's too funny.
Which part? No.
Look, what you said takes us sets us up for question 3, because yes, that lock her up shit is, oh my gosh.
Yeah, and Hillary's not even running, and they still lock her up. You fools! What are you there? Are they giving them Kool-Aid spiked with hallucinogens before they get to the rally? What's going on? I don't know.
Some.
Okay. I guess just a couple of things. I love the fact that we're having the conversation in terms of what this is and what this isn't, and I'm so impressed with everything that I've heard. I'm just like, yeah, this is really good. I guess on a personal level, when you look at respectability, and where are you and where aren't you political? So I can look outside, but at some point personally, I don't know when respectability is more my personality, my tradition. There are parts of me that I am not willing to give up because it is no longer in vogue. And so if that means that I now need to be angry on the outside and I need to have my phone out, even though I know that at some point I may be injured. My thing is, safety comes first for me. That if somebody has more power over me, then my political strategies may have to wait until I'm safe again and can fight another day. So I love this conversation. And the only other thing that comes to mind is it feels like it is pitting us against each other in a strange sort of generational way. That we have to be real careful that we're not calling each other sellouts and we're not calling each other acting white, or, you know, am I thinking that the closer I get to poverty, does that mean that I am more politically acceptable? I don't know. I mean, it's just so many questions, and I love what everybody was saying, especially about how complex this is. I just don't know. I just don't like the idea of younger people thinking that older people are sellouts in some way, shape, or form, as opposed to learning from their struggles and coming up with smaller solutions and smaller strategies that kind of say, well, how can we merge and work together? Because, you know, you have the endurance to go out and march and everything, but there are also things that we can do. And then the last point is, how much of respectability is culture? That is the American culture. Some of that is just culture. Some of it is not even political. And are we saying then that if we are not practicing respectability, are we then all supposed to move more towards an Afrocentric culture? And I'm particularly talking about African Americans at this point. I mean, what would it look like if I was no longer practicing respectability? What would that even look like? I just think that we're arguing something that's so nebulous that I think it would be better to start thinking about what are the strategies, as opposed to what's not a good strategy when we don't even know what it is.
One example I could give, Kim, and this is but one example. What some academics, specifically Black academics, specifically Black rhetoricians, have begun to do is what the scholar Rashawn Ashanti Young introduced.
I didn't even get the name. I mean,
his name is Rashawn Ashanti Young, and he talks about code meshing. So one form of respectability that we continue to keep, we continue to bump against our diction, our language, the rhetoric, the discourse, even. And so code meshing means that so we've been taught to code switch. So like if you grew up in a lower class or working class homes and folks didn't necessarily so-called speak standard American English, and there was a disconnect between the Englishes that you spoke, at home versus at school or in public space, in private and public sphere, that what you would do is say, okay, you switch. So when I'm in this space, I speak this way, but when I'm in this space, I can speak this way. And so he advocates pushing against respectability in some ways is code meshing, that no, I can use African American vernacular English in the workplace. And if I so want to, I can use so-called standard English at home. It does not matter, because of the point is the way I speak does not tell you anything about my intelligence. And that is the farce that we've been sold, that when a person so-called is articulate or speaks well, that, oh, that person must be smart. Or if a person uses, $1 million words, like a lot of the critical theory that I read, oh, that person has some very good ideas. That's bullshit, right? So it's just this way of, I'm sorry?
Nicole, adjust your camera a little bit, please, so we can see.
Oh, sorry about that. Is that better?
Okay. Now that's good, right there.
Okay.
Okay. Nicole, okay. I hear what you're saying. I've heard this argument.
It's like not doing that thing.
I heard this argument before, and it doesn't sit well with me. It just seems to me that I am an individual, and I want to be embraced by African Americans for whoever I am. If I'm somebody that so-called code switches, that's my business. If you think I'm practicing respectability politics, that's fine. Embrace me too. But if you don't want to be that way, or does not working for you, that's good for you. But I'm just saying that for me, when I'm with children, I speak a different way. When I'm with women and there are no men around, I speak a different way. When I'm with my girls, I have the worst potty mouth. I'm not going to do that with you all, but I consistently switch parts of myself because there are parts of myself that are different around different settings. So I understand that. I just wish that at the end of the day we weren't beating each other up.
Well, no, but the respectability, so that's fine. That's cultural. The respectability comes in when you're saying, oh, I can't talk, these white people are here. I can't talk that way. Or if someone is saying to you, hey, don't talk, I have had people say that. They're gonna think all of us are like this. Who cares? We are a group, and then we are still individuals, as you're saying, Kim. So it's a pushing back against that. Who cares? But it's not necessarily, Kim. She brings in Cooper brings in black leaders in her argument, but it is a way more so, as what Leonie says when we talk about respectability. It is performing. It is always considering the white gaze more so. That's what I'm saying. I think we have to unlock here with what you're saying. Like, we know black folks that we weren't shocked when President Obama was doing the dust your shoulder off and all of that, black cool. We weren't shocked. We understand that, but it's specifically a way to decenter the white gaze. So always stop having conversations about, well, what are the white people going to think? Oh, well, what are, it's to stop that and to center what we need and what we want and ways we're going to move ahead without worrying about being surveilled and watched and, well, what are they going to think? Oh, we can't do that because, so that's all I'm saying there. But no, I think what you're describing quite okay. Those are just different contexts, but it is problematic when you have black folks saying, "Girl, you don't." He's gonna think all of us are, or no, you're gonna look. They're gonna think you're angry. Okay, and so that's more so the respectability.
But you don't feel like if we are in a situation where we are oppressed, we're the group that's oppressed. If we're now singling out which one of us are acting a certain way and which one of us aren't, that seems like more internalized racism to me. That's what this could be, and it could actually divide us in terms of which generation that you have grown up with, as opposed to saying, what is the new strategy? What's a framework of not practicing respectability? What does that look like? What does that look like for somebody that most people can push that person or push that group forward and say, this is something that, could replace respectability on some level. I don't know what that is. And that's why I'm having a problem with.
I think you gave it to us, though, Kim. Be you, regardless of context. That's the whole thing. What you said is a powerful strategy. Like you said, hey, when I'm with this group, I'm gonna say I might cuss a little bit more if I'm with these folks. But you're not worried about somebody attaching that to all black women. You're not worried about somebody. You didn't say to us, oh, I better do this because then they're going to think all black women, all black people are this way. Oh my gosh, I can't, So I think what you said, that's the best strategy. Just be you. And if you're going to talk goo gaga with the baby, that's beautiful. And like you said, girls. When I'm with my girls, I might cuss a little bit more. And then when I'm talking to you all, I'm, that is, in my opinion, a beautiful strategy. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing, but it's a constant pressure to, oh, you got to consider this. Oh, you can't, and so forth. And I agree with you. Some of what Brittney Cooper's criticism of Barack Obama, he's a politician, right? So that is a role, that is a whole persona and performance. So we do have to think about that. But for us, average James Joes, everyday people, I don't accept somebody telling me that you gotta do that or you gotta do that because they might think all of us. I've literally had people say that to me. They might think all of us are like, or they may think all of us feel that.
I'm laughing because I've had that happen. I was at my daughter's school, and it was predominantly white school, and it was a black woman and we were talking, and I don't know how the topic came up, but she starts saying how she washes her cat, and I said, "You wash your cat?" And she says, every ass in my house has to be washed. I even wash the cat's ass. Do you know how quickly I moved away from that woman? Now I'm being honest. I'm being real honest. Had we been more diverse group, but because she and I were the only African American women, I had to get away from her because I don't want to be associated with crazy.
Okay, now that is crazy.
So I'm listening to you and I'm saying, I did run from that sister that time.
That did sound good.
And the thing is, I mean, after delivering her sermon on anti-respectability, Cooper finally says she herself is a model of respectability. She finally says that, the amount, that how and when you express your rage is directly proportional to, how much power you have access to. And so I think that goes back to what I was saying earlier, that, that there's a time and a place for everything. And, even too much of a good thing can be bad. And so, it's like everything kind of exists on a continuum. And so, there are people, she points to like Clarence Thomas, etc. There are people who can take the respectability mindset and turn it into something really ugly.
That's right.
But it's kind of like playing with fire. Just because fire can be a little bit dangerous doesn't mean it doesn't have its good purposes, but you have to learn how to use it, and be safe with it.
And I'm not advocating I just want to say really quickly, I'm not saying it in the sense of, just go and act an ass in public space. No, that's, first off, I'm just too old for that. I'm for it. I don't do that. I don't have a need to. Don't children doing it. It's not necessary. But what I am saying is that it is time out. I feel for us to always be worried about, oh, they're gonna think this about us. They're gonna think that. I don't, or in the context of gender, for the ways in which we're starting to hear and the voices of sex workers, and it's just on many levels, right? When we talk about respectability politics, that we're not just saying, I'm saying that I respect you as a laborer, that's your work. It's not for me, but that's your work. But no, I'm definitely not saying like, that's silliness. It's just the ways in which we tend to, I think, each other. And I'm glad that you bring that up, Michelle, about Cooper saying that, because I think it's so meaningful for Cooper, because that's what she was doing. Remember, when she goes through her girlhood, she was a model of, and the toxic ways that respectability can manifest and materialize, right? And it was a form of self-loathing, if you will, of not, of seeing herself as different from blacks. And that's the problem, though. And I say that to, our black immigrants who come to America. You gonna be read as Black American, and you gonna deal with some of this stuff that we deal with. For the ones who want to be outside and not necessarily mixed with us, gonna be read that way, and you might face the similar consequences. And whether I am a Black woman of, this a social class standing, look at what happened to Oprah, who went into that store to buy a bag, and she's freaking Oprah. She's upper class, clearly, very wealthy. For the welfare queen, you're gonna face discrimination. There is no way, I say we gotta attend to the ways in which we want to be outside of, certain. Don't mix me up, with those certain blacks. You know what I'm saying? And I really think that might be more so the problem. But she's just making an argument and has to, as we've been saying, put everything in one bag, which is kind of hard here.
Thank you. I like what Michelle was just saying, not to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Well, thank you for that rich discussion, everyone. I think we shall move on to the next question. Do we have a reader?
I really like this question, so if nobody
okay.
else, I will read it. Okay. Of the Obamas on Inauguration Day, Cooper writes, and she quotes, "We felt our ancestors smiling. We felt new possibilities taking shape for our children. For once, America had let us win. The project of respectability had triumphed. It has proven that if Black people would simply get educated, be upstanding and respectable, and work hard, they could be absolutely everything, even president." She then links that to Inauguration Day for 45, which she describes, and quote, the most symbolic evidence of the failure of the project of African American respectability. Thinking back to that time, were you holding the same hopes and dreams Cooper is describing here, watching the Obamas make their way into the White House? Do you agree with her view of its failure as a strategy for African American respectability?
I must say, even I'm impressed with myself. I like that question.
All right, Leonie.
You a virtual pat on the back. That was a beautiful. And I will just say quickly, you all, because I'm running my mouth too much, and I said I was going to work on that this session. I'm just saying, I have been in constant a state of sorrow under this president. This is a form of like torture. I don't know if other Black women feel this way. It is every day, it's something new. It is mind-boggling. It is, you know what it is? I heard this argument people were talking about when Black Panther came out, and they said that with the women warriors of Wakanda, and they said this is what happens when Black women love their love their nations, and the nation loves them back. To me, the 45 presidency symbolizes, it shows me what happens, like the vitriol, a state of being when I am not, when my nation does not consider, when all the public signs say, we don't love Black women, Black children, Black men, Black, brown, you name it. It's just so very obvious to me, this kind of the cruelty that could be unleashed at any moment on our bodies, our very beings, the very conceptualization of Blackness. This demonstrates it for me. And you could have a man who does not have to have, does not have to achieve like the Obamas. His wife can plagiarize Michelle Obama's speeches and everything is okay. Michelle Obama shows her arms, but this woman does like, corn, centerfold, whatever she did, and that's okay. Um, it's just so very unfair. And the levels we have to go to and the standards we have to hold ourselves to, that the right white man can totally bypass, and it's quite okay.
Well, yes, Nicole, many of us are having a very hard time with 45, but to the questions, I just want to say, no, I don't see what happened with the Obamas as evidence of failure of African American respectability. I think that hate is very often irrational. Hate is very often manifestation of insanity. And that hate is deeply embedded in American society. We've seen it this week. We see it every week. But this week we have the example of the killings at the synagogue in Pittsburgh. Now, if Black folks in America think we've been having a hard time trying to find some place where we can live and feel free, then we need to talk to the Jews. We're not the only ones on earth that have been seeing this kind of intolerance and madness and violence, and just pure insanity. And so, given all of that, because racism is alive and well, I think the reality is that if Barack Obama had acted like Donald Trump in 2008, if Michelle Obama had a story like Melania Trump in 2008, we would have never known Barack and Michelle as the president and first lady of the United States. It simply wouldn't have happened. And so I see that as a success of respectability politics. It took them so far. It took them as far as you can possibly take it. Did it wipe out hate? No, far as I can tell, it unleashed some shit. the backlash of which we will be dealing with for years to come. But the success is that with all that they did to be respectable citizens in their development in their lives, ultimately, that helped them achieve a certain status. Like Oprah, didn't solve all the problems. And so, you know, so I think that, you know, as I said earlier, yes, I was overjoyed at their election, but I never pinned all of my hopes and dreams over this single election being evidence of anything other than a single Black man, biracial Black man, you know, having been elected. I never saw it as the end of racism or proof of American progress. And so I was concerned back then because there were so many young people that came in to electoral politics, you know, as a result of being turned on by Barack. And I was really concerned then that there was so much hope being projected onto him that it was going to be met with an equal disappointment. And so, you know, I think that Donald and Melania are just, you know, the opposite side of that coin. That's America coming to rebalance itself. And hopefully if we survive that monster, you know, we'll get somebody a little more middle of the road. You know, we can go back to kind of having a night sleep every now and then, Nicole.
I think Michelle. I think when you look at the demographics, and for the last 20 years, it was just stated that the world is getting darker and darker in terms of people, and that the so-called white race is shrinking. And so all of a sudden now, when you start to look at having rights for everybody, you know, women's rights, rights for gay people, and all of a sudden you have this base that says, "Hey, the Constitution, everything was about me. How come you're changing things now?" So they are resisting the change that is coming to place. So we're not the resistance, they are the resistance. And so their resistance in my mind is a cancer. And that cancer will burn the country down before it allows itself to not be the one in power. So for Barack and Michelle to sit in the White House, when this cancer exists before them, it's going to exist after them, whether or not they wear pumps, pearls, perms, whatever they do. This cancer was already here. It started in the Constitution. You read the Constitution, it talks about that this was their right. This was the white man's right. So for me, it felt like I don't see it as a failure. I don't see it as a failure at all. I just see it as when you line up something as cancerous as racism with whether or not I aspire to take on a certain level of culture that's a part of the country that I live in. I just need you to give me a better solution, a better strategy that is going to be something that we can implement. Because my fear is is that we're going to use respectability politics to separate ourselves even further. And I don't think we can afford to not be all on the same page right now. And you're right, there are these people who are way out there, like Ben Carson, is it, and you know, Clarence Thomas. I think though we're not talking about them. We're just talking about the average everyday us. And so I just think that we need to find strategies that pull in everybody right now, because we are being annihilated. So it troubles me a lot to keep hearing about respectability politics if it's not going to be said in a way that unifies as opposed to separates.
Thank you. So, Nicole, I can see your mouth moving, but we can't hear a word you're saying. Sorry, we're still not hearing it.
I wanted to ask a quick question. I guess one of the question would be, there is this Black Women's Studies of Civil by Kathy J. Cohen, Punks, Bull Daggers, and Welfare Queens. And my question would be, would we be okay if the next phase of so-called Black leadership were punks, bull daggers, and, as she says, and welfare queens? Like, there is in the article, she makes an argument that when those voices can speak truth to power, can have, you know, a space, can enter public sphere and demand rights, and we all tend to, you know, us, I guess I would have to say, working people, laborers, not necessarily, I don't think she's attending to capitalists, so-called, but that maybe we might, and I want to say she specifically kind of considers people of color when she's saying punks, bull daggers, and welfare queens. Would we be okay for leadership to look like that? Is it okay for, you know, as I said, Michael Brown's mother, who I think had a gold tooth in her mouth, I think, or something, you know, have we reached that point that, you know, we can be okay with Black leadership looking that way? I'm just curious to know, like, what do you all think? Do you all think we're still not there? Or you think we've reached a time where we're seeing protest movements? Do you think protest movements like the movement for Black Lives has got us, you know, that there, you know, to say, okay, let's consider these people, these folks, and these voices?
Me, personally, I think anybody who got up before me in the morning who has some insight that's going to help me understand something a little bit better. I don't necessarily care what they look like. I don't feel that anybody is above me or beneath me. You know, we grew up poor. So anything that I have obtained through my own self. Grew up in public schools, you know, so I'm not an elitist. So I definitely feel that everybody's welcome to the table. And that's what I liked about the civil rights movement. Everybody was invited to the table. And that's my concern, that we're going to find some way to separate ourselves when the civil rights movement wasn't always about that. It did have too much men representation, you know, but no, I would not have a problem with that at all. Just I don't want to see the too much of the flesh out when you know, if you the you know, the sex person and you the leader, I'm all good with that, but you know, just keep it you know, never mind.
Keep it classy. Okay.
Keep it covered. You don't have to even keep it classy. It's just keep it covered. You know, so. And then when you're not leading us, then go on back and do what you got to do. Handle your business.
Yeah, well, and I think, I think Black folks have always been open to, some of everybody. Like I'm thinking of of Al Sharpton, particularly in the early days, and the kind of image that he projected, or somebody mentioned Cornel West earlier, with his wild afro, and I'm thinking of Angela Davis and her big afro. I think that there's always been an openness in the Black community to kind of listening to whoever had that eloquence, whoever had that eloquent rage, whoever was kind of really willing to step out there. So could we use more of it? Yeah, but I'm an advocate for multi-strategy. So, but yeah. Leonie, we haven't heard much from you tonight.
I've been going. I've been making room for others. I think, so my whole thing is, I don't hold, I didn't hold any particular hope around the Obamas. It seemed to me that they were an anomaly. I really didn't fall for the whole, chocolate Camelot narrative that seemed to be going on with them, because I just feel like, particularly with the way that politics is structured here, that smoke and mirrors is the actual normal. And so it seems to me that, while they certainly fit under every kind of, tick every box around this question of respectable people, that this country is not about respectable people and leadership. Look at how government is structured here.
Right.
Look at how things get moved forward and advanced. It's not about respectable anything. And so for me, it wasn't so much that the election of Donald Trump indicated failure. The whole thing was set up for failure. I think it was great in terms of having on an international stage this idea of an inspirational leader, but it may as well have been a fiction novel or fantasy fiction novel for all of the impact it was going to have. I'm sorry, that's just the way that I held it. The greatest thing about January, whatever date was, whenever he got, was that I was just in shock that the man was still alive. Like every morning I woke up, I'd go to HuffPost.com to see whether or not he was killed yet. Every morning I did that.
Right.
For me, that's a triumph.
Right. Right.
And he's been out of office for how long now, and they're still trying to kill him.
Right.
So, that's just the way it is. I don't, and I think in terms of for us, when I look at and when I say us, I'm talking about you all African Americans. But it's so. My biggest concern is that there's no moving forward together. It seems as though, because this idea of individualism, which is so pernicious in this culture, means that progress does not seem to be all that possible. The civil rights movement was a movement. And yes, Black Lives Matter is a movement, but it has so much opposition even within the Black community that it's a weekend movement. It's already, it's got arthritis. I don't know what it's not that strong. And so I think that until what I find so inspiring, as I said before, about the Marielle Franco example was that like there was just this understanding that you have to move forward as a community. Here you have a group of people who literally have like this weakened sense of citizenship just because they're of African descent in Brazil and they grow up in these favelas that they've been put in, which has many counterparts. It's the equivalent of a ghetto, so-called ghetto for the African Americans have been forced to live in the United States. And they knew enough to create a network to replace the fallen leader. I don't know whether or not, I don't see that strategy coming forth out of such an individualistic culture, unless there's someone to actually set that vision in place. So,
Leonie, how do Black Canadians identify themselves?
Well, this is the thing. They identify themselves sometimes as Black Canadians, but like the thing is that it's not comparable. I keep telling, like, anti-Blackness is a thing, but in terms of identity, it's not comparable because one, less than 3% of the population, most of the population's only been here for 50 years or less. There isn't, and also Canadian society is not structured in such a way that like Black people need to band together. It doesn't, like politically, it doesn't work like that because, for example, we don't do things by state or province, right? So it's not like in the United States, Black people got to write in this state first, and then in that state second, and it doesn't work that way here. Like I bring up the example before of gay marriage. Gay marriage became legal in Canada across the board. You understand? Like it came from the court, the end. Recently, marijuana has become legal in Canada. Why? Federal government said no longer going to oppose. It's done. It's not a state by state. Here, it's like state by state, county by county, blah, blah, blah. So it's very different politically. And I'm not saying that the effect of it is that it's easier just because of the system.
Mm-hmm.
What it also means is that like there isn't a level of consciousness around race or anti-Blackness or other oppressions because things happen in such a way that it's like, because things happen across the board. So there isn't as much awareness or consciousness around, for example, responding to acts of racism. Like they've been trying to, for example, remove statues of people in Canada, and it doesn't have the same kind of pickup here because it's almost like if you're in Canada, if you're an opposing group, you're seen as like, I don't know, you have to, it's very difficult to go counterculture here because the culture is moved in a different way. I don't even have the words to articulate it, but just to say that like it structurally is so different that it's not really all that comparable. Like people ask me all the time, when's Canada going to have the first Black prime minister? And it's like, I don't know. Like most people haven't been here that long, And the other thing too is that like it could happen the next election, it could happen 100 years from now because our defense minister is foreign born, our minister of immigration is foreign born. Like it just works differently here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it's just hard for me to compare sometimes.
Well, Cooper did talk about, I said something about individual strategies being limited and collective strategies being able to take us so much further. But from my perspective, all strategies have their limitations, whether they're individualized or collectivized, and and all strategies have the potential to make a difference in some small way. It may be a drop of water in the ocean kind of a way, or it may be a tsunami kind of a way. But once again, we need it all.
Yeah. But the other thing that I see, though, I think it would be really powerful, and I'd love to see more of this, is because things are so fractured in the U.S. in terms of where, like politically. So, like, what you do in your county or in your neighborhood has significant impact on that neighborhood. So, like, what would it be like, for example, for, the people in whatever, say in St. Louis, no, in St. Ferguson, what would it be like to have a group of Black women get together and say, we want a restorative justice system with our police? Like, even if it's just something that happens within like 10 city blocks, it would shift everything in those 10 city blocks.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I see that as being incredibly powerful. Like the collective doesn't have to be large, like is a point I'm making. The collective does not have to be large in order for it to be impactful. So you can actually use the fractured political state in the US to have significant improvement in life quality, in my imagination, unlike here.
I think one of the problems that we face is that understanding like power of media, because a lot of times it is, so one of the things that 45's election has really made resonate with so many of us is that the local elections really do matter, and that people have got to get involved in, local elections, the midterm elections and so forth. Those matter. But I think when you're saying like it doesn't have to be a large collective, not if that small collective has a means to meet, to kind of communicate a power, to meet and be able to talk back, speak back, to fight back against power. But you've had a lot of Black women who've done grassroots activism who've just really been dismissed. And it's like, get your ass out of here. We don't have to listen to you. And so that's why media have been so important. Because you kind of here in the US, you do need people backing. You do need a lot of times, people to have a knowledge of, okay, this is not right, which is why we have found social media to be so accessible and to be able to pressure, companies, corporations, individuals, because it's this notion of, people finding out about you, people finding out about your company or whatever. But I say I love what you're saying, Leonie, and Black, you have just examples of Black women doing those things and being dismissed. But we do, and I think we're getting to that, that place, that point where we say, okay, we know that some Black folks, gonna go with African traditional religions. Some Black folks gonna be Christian. Some gonna be Buddhist. Gonna be whatever. But we still have to come together and respond to structural oppression, systemic racism. We still have to come together, whether you're young, old, whether you are poor, upper class, middle class. It's something that we have got to respond to. So I see it occurring. It's just sad that these are such ugly or horrible times. And now, you all know that he's talking about birthright and oh gosh, what I'm thinking of the commercial when I was a little girl, and it said, what will they think of next? That's kind of how I like, what?
Yeah.
What will they think of next?
Yeah. You know what it's making me think of, though, what this conversation that we're all having tonight is that we have been talking about politics, and this book is often talking about politics, but it seems to me that there needs to be a twin movement around Black liberation. Because somehow the not having the liberation, it shrinks, neuters the imagination, right? So it seems to me that those need to be twin things, because it's not just about the winning. It's like, you need to know what you want. So I think that's why maybe, I don't know, that just occurred to me. It might be all gibberish, but it's what came to me now.
No, it's not gibberish. It's you know, Black folks have been at this for a long time. And so, you know, we've tried some of everything from grinding up pieces of glass and putting it in mass porridge. on down the line. And I think, you know, Cooper touches on it a bit where she talks about, you know, particularly the example of like Shakira, the teenager who they threw across the room like a rag doll. But it was Black folks, you know, in the background saying, why that girl just didn't give up her phone, you know, or give the school resource officer his job back. Because this conversation, this practice around liberation has gone on, but for a lot of people, it makes them very uncomfortable. And I guess really scares them to death. And that's, you know, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying that's a reality of it. And I think a reality that's probably always going to be there. And so
is it like this idea? I just want to make sure I'm
knowing that, you know, like there's the idea of the talented 10th, you know, strategically. It's like, right. But the idea that maybe we're never going to have 100% of the people, you know, on 100% of the page. And if that's true, then what?
Yeah. It's almost like, if I'm hearing you right, it's like, yeah, like there's fear there. It's like Black people are like in their own like Stockholm syndrome kind of like thing. But people do get out of the Stockholm syndrome mind lock. You can get out of it, and to deal with the fear. But yeah, I think the fear is definitely there, because there is we know that many things and many people and many other species and everything, that there's safety, that there is safety to be had in the box that you are placed in. And so people may need to be convinced or have the experience of having safety, kind of like pushing in boundaries a little bit.
Yeah, and you know, and it's quite possible that the monstrosity that is 45 and, you know, whatever ugliness comes after him will truly push us to the point where our comfort zones are no longer safe spaces, and we have to do something in a different way.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not.
I think it's. I mean, there are trauma bonds, and then there when you talk about how some of the trauma and the terror of African Americans is moved from DNA and down into your DNA. It was so bad. So I think that when we talk about, if we're going to have all these other people at the table, we also have to make room at the table for people who are terrified and have those trauma bonds, especially if it's not safe to, you know, you may be killed. You're going to have to put some skin in the game in order for us to have this liberation. It's not going to be given to you.
Right.
Yeah,
So
I think that, yeah.
And then the last thing I just wanted to say was that I had went with a group where they invited, I think, 6 police officers and 6 activists in to spend a weekend together, and for us to understand them and them to understand us, and to see that we were all human. And the police officers were very, very diverse, but most of the activists were people of color. And it was a very interesting exchange, because you could see that they have the same trauma bond that we have. That they are not. It just seemed like their fear of their own system was as great as our fear was of their system.
Yeah.
That's what I got.
Yeah. Resma Manikim, I've shared, I think, a post in the group before about your grandmother's hands. He talks about that there is like tremendous amount, that as much trauma as we are holding, you will also find trauma amongst white people and amongst police. He mentions police specifically. Amongst these 3 groups, that there is, that are steeped and soaked in trauma. So yeah, I think that's a really important thing to remember. Yeah. I'm wondering if we're, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to try to bring us to a close because I need to go. But, I want to thank you for the wonderful questions. Obviously, they got us started. But Kim had mentioned earlier reading something by Ntozake Shange, who last week.
Yeah,
Kim?
thank you so much, Leonie. I mirror Michelle there. Very good discussion.
Thank you for the timekeeping. Because I'm in a different time zone, I don't track these things well. Thank you, everybody. So yes, Kim, do you have a reading?
Yeah, I wanted to pick a shorter one, if that's okay.
Okay.
It's one of the shortest things in the book, and it just goes to say that for color girls who considered suicide, when the rainbow is enough, is a celebration of being Black and being woman. In poetry and in prose, a remarkable power. Ntozake Shange sets out to sing a Black girl's song, bring her out, to know her, to know you, but sing her rhythms, caring, struggle, hard times, sing her song of life. She's been dead so long, closed and silent so long. She doesn't know the sound of her own voice, her infinite beauty. She's half notes scattered without rhyme, no tune, sings her sighs, sing the song of her possibilities, sing the righteous gospel, the making of a melody. Let her be born, let her be born, and let her be handled warmly. Rest in peace.
Yes, rest in peace.
That's amazing.
Amazing.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Kim.
Yes,
and thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Leonie.
Oh, thank you. Thank
Yes,
you.
indeed.
Sometimes I worry because, like, I like to push a little.
Push away.
I think everybody rose to the occasion. I think we rose to the occasion.
That goes without saying. So thank you, everybody, for joining us during our live session of the Global Black Feminist Reading Circle. Please join us next week as we read our story together. Goodbye.
All right. Have a good week, ladies.